The iPad mini continues to conquer and divide. To some, it's the perfect iPad. To others, it's old tech and a waste of space. Well, I've been using this 7th gen iPad mini now, I guess, for around 4 months. And in almost every way, it's exactly what I would have wanted from this iPad mini, apart from one major mistake. Hi, my name's David. This is D Talking Tech, and here we only talk about Apple intelligently. When the iPad was released late last year, it got a fairly lukewarm reception, it's fair to say. There wasn't a lot of fanfares about it. There wasn't that many headlines about it either, which is kind of a shame. People were saying it was just a refresh and not a relaunch. Well, maybe that's true, but here's my thought on that. Some brands would make change just for change's sake. Apple didn't do that. I think they went by the notion that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Why reinvent the wheel? The iPad mini is great at most of the things it sets out to do, so why go and make blanket changes just for the sake of it? Well, some of it's cost saving, possibly yes, but equally, I think that we need to celebrate what the iPad mini is great at and not try to make it into something that it's not. Now, the iPad mini, I hate using the word value on many of the Apple videos because let's face it, all of their devices are expensive, but at £500 for this base model that I've got, it almost represents value for money. It's one of the cheapest ways to get into the Apple ecosystem, and I think I'm right in saying it is the cheapest way to get into Apple Intelligence. Now, I'm sure I'll mention Apple Intelligence in passing again at some point in this video, but this video is not about Apple Intelligence. We're all well aware of the flaws that are inherent in it at the moment, but at least this iPad mini is Apple Intelligence ready. So I think apart from the iPad 10th gen, which is fractionally cheaper than this is the cheapest way to get into the Apple ecosystem. Some of the features that people wanted or saying they wished had been on this iPad when it was re-released late last year, I think those features would have almost made it more into an iPad mini Pro. And for the record, I don't want an iPad mini Pro. I'm really happy with what they've given us here. It works for virtually every instance, apart from one that I want to use it for. And it's the perfect size, absolutely the perfect size. It fits into coat pockets, overcoat pockets, jeans at a push. Ladies, I guess, can fit it into handbags, rucksacks, obviously. It's really transportable. It's really easy to use day in, day out, wherever you happen to be. So, as I said, let's not try to make it into what it's not. Let's celebrate what it is. Now, bezels. If you've watched many of my videos in the past, you'll know that I'm not really a big bezels person. In fact, before I started making content, I didn't realize how big a thing bezels were to people, how it really infuriated so many people in the tech world. The bezels on here are a lot smaller. Let's just remember how big the bezels were on older iPads. They are slim now. But the reason I think we need some bezel on here, we don't want it to be like an iPhone with super, super slim bezels, is because more and more now, this is being held portrait, upright. I'm using it more as a notebook or an e-reader than any other device. And I think for that reason alone, you need just something around the edge where your thumbs can naturally rest without constantly touching on the screen. Now, speaking of the screen, I'm reaching for this far more now than my iPhone for day-to-day tasks. I don't know what it's like with you. I meant to say this before. The phone kind of just sits there in the back of our arsenal. It's a center to all of our Apple ecosystem, but it's probably the device I touch and use least. It's the most important part, but it's not the item that I use most during the day. No, this I'm reaching for more and more and more. In every way, of course, the iPhone screen smashes this completely. That 6.9-inch OLED display, 2000 nits of brightness, I think it is, 120 hertz refresh rate, which I'll be talking about a little bit more in a moment. It smashed it in every respect, except this is the device, this is the tablet I'm still reaching for more than my iPhone because it's got that 8.3-inch display. It's just easier to do things on here. It's easier to read web pages, easier to fill in forms. You've got the Apple Pencil, which I'll be talking more about later on. If I want to do some editing on here, it's easier to do some editing on some photos on here. It's just a bigger screen. So this is actually, in a kind of way, replaced my iPhone. Does that make sense? And carrying on talking about the screen, brightness. That's attracted some attention. Let's just get into that, shall we? It's only got 500 nits of brightness. Now, say only got 500 nits of brightness. That's the same as a MacBook Air. And when was the last time you heard somebody moaning that a MacBook Air wasn't bright enough? Both are designed very much to be used on the fly and away from your desk, away from the studio or office environment. So they're both potentially going to be used in bright daylight conditions. Yet no one really mentions MacBook Air's brightness. And okay, it could be because I'm here in the UK. We don't necessarily get the most days of direct sunlight, but the times I've used it outdoors, very rarely have I found myself struggling to see what's on the screen. It's bright enough. So would I have liked a bit more brightness? Yeah, But is it a deal breaker? No. Now, wrapping up on the screen, we're going to talk about the refresh rate. And I know this is going to be very divisive. I know that. The tech community seems split in half as to where they stand on 120 hertz refresh rate. Look, I've got the iPhone 16 Pro Max. I've got an iPad Pro. I know what 120 hertz refresh rates looks like. Now, it could be that I am not the ideal demographic for 120 hertz refresh rate. I've always told you, I've been completely honest with you, I've never been a gamer. I've never gamed at all. I've not downloaded a game to any of my devices. Maybe that's where it really shines. But the way I use my devices is more for static work. I mean, a lot of my work is very pixel intensive. I can be editing photos or videos, as you know, not so much on here, but I can be doing that kind of work. But a lot of the time I'm looking at content. I'm looking at something, say, on Apple TV or on Netflix or Apple Fitness, or I'm reading websites, I'm looking at Apple News. They're static pages. I'm not constantly, frenetically scrubbing the screen up and down, trying to see if I can get any jelly scrolling out of it and bemoaning the fact it hasn't got 120 hertz refresh rate. I know there's the school of thought that says that at the price point that Apple are charging for all of their devices, 120 hertz should be, 120 hertz refresh rate should be across the range. And I kind of get that. But to me, and I can feel I'm going to get some heat on this, to me, it's just not that big of a deal. What I want are great punchy screens. Now, the iPad Pro is 4 times the price. On there, I've got the best display that I've ever used. Tandem OLED, deep, rich, dark blacks, punchy colors, super bright. It's fantastic, but it is a £2,000 tablet. On here, though, when I reach for this and I'm watching some content, do I notice or do I think that it's a bad display? No. It gives me everything I want in this beautiful handheld form. It's everything I could possibly have asked for. Hopefully, you're enjoying this video. And if you are, I'm just going to ask you once, maybe sub. If you're enjoying it, consider giving me that sub. It really does help the channel out. I've got all sorts of content coming. I will be covering the iPhone 16e. I've got some exciting plans on that. And generally, there's going to be quite a few devices coming out this year. So if you're finding this content interesting, that sub really does help. And something I forget to mention every week is, if you're enjoying the videos that I make here and you want just a little bit more of me for free, every Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock UK time, I send out a free video newsletter. I sit here and I talk to you about what's going on behind the scenes, things I can't really talk about on these main videos. And I think a lot of people are finding it quite interesting. We just talk about everything that comes up during the week, what it's like working with sponsors, what it's like behind the scenes, what it's like running a channel, all of that we cover. If you want to be on my mailing list, just go to talkingtechandaudio.com, leave me your details there, and it's a totally free video newsletter you will get every single weekend there. I finally remembered to mention it. Let's get back to the hero of this video, and that's the iPad mini. For those people that said not a lot changed when it was re-released, just go under the skin. It's got twice the amount of RAM. That's a fairly important upgrade. It's gone from 4 to 8. We know it's got 8 because of Apple Intelligence, and 8 gigs of RAM is the minimum that Apple Intelligence requires to run on these devices, and all of Apple's devices now will be Apple Intelligence ready. Whenever that begins to kick in, at least this iPad is going to see you into the future with it. And it's got the A17 chip in as well. And it's not even a ridiculously binned down version of the chip that we found in the 15 Pros. I think you've got 1 less GPU core. That's all. I think it's got a 6-core CPU and a 5-core GPU. But it makes for a better gaming experience, so I'm told. I spoke to other creators that do game, and they said, yeah, you can realistically game on here. Apparently, you can get some handheld devices to go on here and make it into a pretty decent gaming experience. The storage is actually working out well for me as well, because the apps and iPadOS is so well optimized now. This is only the 128 gig model that I've got here, and it's working out just fine for me. I've got about 65, 70 gigs used, and I can't think of much else I want to put on here at all. Now, looking further into the specs, there's no media encoding or decoding engine on here, which you'd kind of expect. So yes, while you can put Final Cut on here, and while you can put DaVinci Resolve on here as well, I believe, I can't believe it's going to be a good experience. It's not something I would do. The only video work I do on here is maybe adding some captions in CapCut and very small video files, 1080p video files like that. I don't do anything intense on here because it's really not what it was designed for. I've told you before about Bitrix24. It's an AI-powered CRM system which helps you to communicate with clients, manage customer database, and run sales. Bitrix24 CRM offers a full set of CRM tools to store and organize customer information, capture and manage leads, automate routine sales tasks, run email campaigns, and do much more to streamline all of your sales processes. It's quick and easy to create and update new leads, create invoices, or simply to check what's in progress. And now, there's Copilot, a free, powerful AI-powered sales assistant tool that helps create marketing messages, generate ideas, and transcribe calls. You can personalize Copilot to look only at the offers for new leads, leads that are in progress, or for repeat and returning customers. Copilot can also be filtered to check on incoming or outbound calls, and there's even an AI scoring tool that supports sales forecasting to help teams make informed decisions and plan their future sales strategy. There's helpful sales scripts for different scenarios, such as introducing, promotion offers, loyalty building, product presentation, and much more besides. You can use one of the ready-made sales scripts, add your own, or you can upload your custom sales scripts for different client categories like new clients or returning customers. And now, with Bitrix 24 CRM and the power of Copilot, there are tools that will analyze phone calls and rate bad or good calls, which all helps to provide quality improvement tips to train your sales team better and quicker. Copilot will analyze the phone calls, match them against the sample scripts for particular customer categories. And Copilot not only detects the gaps, it conducts a thorough analysis and provides sales teams with actionable recommendations to improve customer interactions and close sales more effectively. From now on, with Bitrix 24 CRM, you can ensure exceptional communication and sales experiences in every single call. It's never been easier to grow your sales productivity and optimize sales processes than with Bitrix 24. Check the link in the description to learn more and register your free Bitrix 24 account today and increase your sales. The USB-C port is worth mentioning because it's twofold. It opens up some opportunities that we'll talk about in just a moment. But from a point of view of file transfer, it's useful, but not groundbreaking. It's the USB 3 port that we've got on here. So it's only got 10 gigs per second data transfer speeds. It comes in, you can at least now attach an SSD to it. You can put files directly onto your iPad. So rather than necessarily all the time wait for cloud sync, which can be flaky sometimes, as we all know, you can put an SSD into it and transfer some files. I wouldn't suggest big files though, because it is still going to be pretty slow. On the charging side of things though, well, it's that good that I forget to charge it. Kind of like AirPods Pro. I've always forget to charge my AirPods Pro because they always seem to have charge on them. And it's the same with this. Now, I mentioned on one of my iPad Pro videos, that seems to run out of juice quicker than I would have expected. And I think, as many of you said, that's because the pencil's attached to it and the keyboard's attached to it all the time. This, of course, being standalone, doesn't have those drawdowns on it, and this always seems to have juice on it. Just before recording this video, I had to charge it up from 30% to full, and it did that in just under an hour, about 45, 50 minutes. It went from 30% up to full. But as I say, the charge and the battery on here, I'm really happy with. It just always seems to have juice with it. Now, when I first bought this, I bought the iPad alone. I didn't buy any accessories for it, but I have now got the case, and I think the case really makes it. Without that case, you can't stand it up in the kitchen if you want to read a recipe off it or just have some videos playing while you're cooking dinner. You can't stand it up on a desk. You can't stand it up in bed on a bedside table. That case, it's reasonably inexpensive, but it just makes the whole iPad experience that much better. And no, I haven't forgotten about that one flaw with the iPad that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I'll be getting to that in just a moment. What surprised me, though, was as a new iPad user, don't forget, this time last year I didn't own an iPad, is how I got into taking notes on it. It's become invaluable if I'm on a phone call or a video call. It's this that I'll reach for to make notes on here. I'm not an artist. I don't draw. So in some respects, the Pencil Pro is kind of overcooked for me, but it's so useful. Now, I mentioned the bezels on there, which make it very handy and easier to use as a notebook. It's just a very easy format to hold. Because I've started to use it more as a notebook, I've actually put a paper-like screen protector on here. Now, I don't use screen protectors on any device. I've never used them on my phones. And I didn't like, well, I had nanotexture on my iPad Pro originally. I swapped that because I didn't like it. It just denatured the screen too much. But because this screen isn't all about that bright tandem OLED, it feels very natural to have that screen protector on it. I hadn't used Paperlike until a few weeks ago, and they're really good. They've got a little bit haptic feedback. They make it softer to the touch. They take away that scratchy feeling. You get two in a pack. They're easy to put on, but they just make it more notebook-like. I really like using them, and I was surprised how much I've taken to writing notes on here, and that's why for the first time ever, I've actually used a screen protector, a Paperlike screen protector on here. Now to that one big flaw that I mentioned at the top of the video. The one thing, this is so nearly perfect, but the one thing they got wrong as far as I'm concerned, the position of the camera. It's still on the short edge. Why did they leave it there? If they'd only simply moved that to the long edge, this would have been perfect. This should be the device that I reach for when I'm making Zoom calls, FaceTime calls, Teams calls, and it's not. I still reach for the iPad Pro. And it's such a shame. If it wasn't for that, this would be virtually complete for me. And it's not that the hardware that's inside of it isn't up to the task either. It's got a 12 megapixel center stage camera, and the mics sound, well, let's have a little listen to what the mics look like and what the cameras look like. But they're more than good enough. It's just a shame that that camera's in the wrong position. And to that one big problem with this lovely iPad mini, there you go, I'm looking at the center now. I'm looking where I should be looking at the screen if I was talking to somebody, but I should of course be looking over there to make eye contact with you. We've all been there, it just feels so unnatural. It's such a shame that they left the camera in the wrong position on this iPad. It feels really weird looking off to that side now. I guess I'm standing around about a foot, maybe 18 inches away, so you get an idea of what the camera's like, what the mics sound like, and as I say, they're good enough. They're good enough. It's just that camera's in the wrong position and it feels really weird and unnatural talking off to one side like this. It's got DisplayPort functionality, and you can hook up external displays to it as well. It supports one display up to 30 Hz in 4K. And I've been using that via the USB-C port. I've been using this espresso display. It hasn't got Stage Manager, so you're not multitasking, but you can mirror what's on the iPad screen to a bigger display. So if you're, say, editing a photo, you can look at it on a bigger display rather than using the smaller display that's on the iPad mini. So again, it just opens up some other ways to use your iPad mini. It makes more of a mini desktop situation if you need it to be that. Now, I mentioned before about the Apple Pencil. Admittedly, for me, the Pencil Pro, it's got more functions than I'll ever use. Basically, I just use it as a pencil, as a pen. They introduced compatibility for pencils on the iPad mini 6, I believe. But then they dropped that compatibility from the Pencil Gen 2 on this iPad, which is the bad side of Apple. I think I might say you have to buy the Pencil Pro that I've got that's compatible to both the iPad Pro and to the 7th gen iPad mini. Now, I was lucky. I already had that pencil, so for me, it's super convenient. You just take it off of the iPad Pro, put it on here, it immediately recognizes it, and you can start using it. But it is the bad side of Apple, the way that they try and charge us for every single thing. Apparently, the pencil, the earlier generation pencil, Pencil 2, does still attach to the iPad mini. It just doesn't recognize it and it doesn't charge, so it's kind of rendered useless. I'd say that's the bad side of Apple. There was one thing that really interests me though, and it's going to interest me about the iPhone 16e. It's the C1 modem. Now, I know this has only just been released, so we probably won't get a refreshed iPad or a re-release of the iPad for a good couple of years yet. But these C1 modems could be the start of another huge step forward for us in the Apple ecosystem. Think back to what Apple Silicon did when we started getting that in the iMacs and the MacBooks. It changed everything. If this C1 modem is as efficient, power efficient as Apple seem to be claiming, and they're hands up at the moment, they're saying they know it's not the finished article just yet, which is why I think they underplayed it at the release of the iPhone 16e. But as they begin to get better, and this is obviously just a soft launch, who's to say we won't see it later this year, maybe in the iPhone 17 Air, if we're getting that slim iPhone, and moving forward into the Pro range of phones, and eventually probably into MacBooks as well. This is going to change everything. And if it's as power efficient as they're saying, well, with Apple now responsible for everything under one roof, silicon, modems, and software, and OS, I think we've got a very, very bright future. I'm an iPad convert. I totally am. I said I hadn't owned an iPad until this time last year, but now if you see me on the sofa at home, it's going to generally be with the iPad mini. If I'm watching content, if I'm watching a movie, oftentimes it's going to be on the iPad mini. Now I've taken to editing photos on here because it's small, it's transportable, I can have it everywhere. That size is a huge USP for this. I said at the beginning, let's celebrate what the iPad mini is and not try to make it into something that it isn't. Apart from that camera, they got pretty much everything right on here and at a good price point. If you've enjoyed this video about the iPad mini, I think you might just enjoy the video that's on screen now about the iPad Pro.